Oregon Homeowner 2022 is your last chance to go solar. In December of 2020.
Many folks are new to LeGrand, remind me from last class. So for new folks, I was up at Catherine Creek, which is a really nice state park that's right near LeGrand yesterday. And I was going out in the evening and there was a combination of sounds. There were wild turkey that were hanging out in some of the trees up in the front. There were crickets chirping in the evening, and there were a bunch of cows and cattle that were from a nearby farm, and it just made for this like cacophonous symphony together, all of these different sounds together. So just kind of silly, but thought I would share this combination of sounds. Got a little bit of, it's like some gobbling and other noises, a little bit hard to hear, but I feel like that combination of sounds and experiences is like the introduction to Eastern Oregon and really captures it if you haven't ever been. All right, so we are at 10 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. This is day 2 of COM 111, Interpersonal Communication with me, Dr. Benjamin Mann. Thank you all for making it here. As I mentioned, for folks who came in on the earlier end, I know this is a pretty small and cramped space. I just put out a request to have us use a larger room. So I will let you know if that request gets accepted and we get moved into a larger space. In the meantime, you are welcome if you would like to spread out the rows or alter your seating in any way to ensure that you have good space. You're welcome to do that. I want you to feel comfortable and have the space that you need and working through all the things that we need to do for the class. So I will keep you updated on any of those changes. I also apologize for the room confusion for today. Should be a couple seats available there in the back. As it turns out, Navigate is one of the resources that tracks information about your courses. And it sounds like Navigate isn't properly syncing. So if you use Banner, which is where you register for courses, that has the most accurate and current information about meeting times, room numbers, etc. But Navigate, which is what I was using when I sent you all the announcement about Zabel, didn't properly update it. So IT is working on that. I let them know about the issue, and I apologize for the confusion again from Monday's class. All right, is there anybody here for the first time today? I think we don't have any returning folks for today. All of you completed that questionnaire form on Monday. I had the chance to review it for a little bit. Some of the things that I noticed in the questionnaire were folks who would like some additional support in regards to the Writing Center and some of the resources available on campus. So I'll be spending a bit of time today going over some of those resources available. A couple folks also expressed a bit of apprehension about taking notes for college courses, right? So it's a good idea to take notes for your classes. And I want to go over just some best practices and tips about how to take notes for this class specifically. And so it'll be a good idea for you to start taking notes on this, as well as your other courses, now that we're getting into some of the nitty-gritty. And then the last thing, a couple of you mentioned that you are a little bit rusty or you've been out of college for a little bit. Well, welcome back. We're happy to have you. And I'm happy to help if you need that support in acclimating and adjusting. The big area that people mentioned wanting some additional support with was in terms of citing sources, right? So if you don't know and have never cited an MLA, APA, or Chicago, or don't really know how to cite sources well, we are dedicating a big chunk of time on next Monday's class to going over expectations for formally citing sources. So hopefully that's useful for you, and hopefully resources on campus, including the Writing Center, will also help with that formal writing process. All right. So I want to start by posing to the group, what is interpersonal communication? Talked a little bit about it last time. How, in your own words, would you define interpersonal communication?
having a conversation or communicating with somebody one-on-one. In that way.
Okay, here's right. Yeah, so having a conversation one-on-one, that's a good example of interpersonal communication. What else is interpersonal communication? Sending a text message, yeah. Is sending a group text message interpersonal communication?
Yeah.
What about sending a message to a single person? Okay. Sending a group text message would not be considered interpersonal communication, right? The big difference here is that interpersonal communication is between two people, right? So it's the exchange of meaning and significant information between two people. However, I think that the definitions that you all provided, some of the examples that you provided, right, are putting us in the right direction. So, since it's the name of the class and is a good idea to know, interpersonal communication focuses on the exchange of meaningful messages between two people, right? Inter, again, referring to an interplay or a relationship. Personal, between people, right? For this class, we're focusing on communication between two people, and this can happen in a lot of different ways, right? So we might think that interpersonal communication is only face-to-face, but interpersonal communication can also be mediated, right? You can use a phone call or longer conversation that's happening through Zoom as an example of interpersonal communication. You can also send a text message, right? But it's this idea that there is a meaningful exchange between two people. So if you are sending a message to somebody and they never read it, right, that doesn't count as interpersonal communication. It has to be understood and it has to be responded to in some manner, or else it's just what's considered to be a parasocial relationship, right? You could be a huge fan of a musician, right? Say you're a huge Taylor Swift fan and you send her a message or email, right? That's not interpersonal communication unless she gets back to you, right? So interpersonal communication is this exchange of meaning between two people. And one thing that's been incredibly interesting to follow has been the importance of nonverbal communication in that process. For folks that have used Zoom, particularly for having your classes and other meetings in the past, how many folks felt really tired out after Zoom meetings? Okay, so a few of you, right? So one of the things that research has found is that when you're in a small, like two-dimensional box, right, our brains essentially work in overdrive to understand and comprehend the nonverbal communication happening, right? It's a smaller space. Our use of physicality and distance and gesturing play a really big role, and that's much harder to detect. You can, of course, compound that if you have a group Zoom meeting and you've got a bunch of those little boxes, right? Or if somebody's just communicating through audio, our brains are working extra hard to figure out and understand all of those messages and try to make sense of somebody's intended meaning, right? We know that when we send texts, that oftentimes there is anxiety that we experience over lack of clarity or context in what's being said. How many people have ever felt like anxiety or concern or reacted in some way, seeing the little three bubbles that show up when somebody's about to send a message but doesn't? Yeah, a few of you, right? Some of you laughing, right? That challenge of understanding and comprehending messages that happen when all we have is text speaks to the power of verbal communication and speaks to all of those clues that we use to make sense of communication every day. So on Monday, we spent some time introducing ourselves, learning a little bit about each of you and what brings you here to EOU. We did a short preview of interpersonal communication we talked about. We went over the syllabus, schedule, course policies, all of that fun stuff. And I want to take a minute, and I will take a minute at the beginning of every class to see if people have any questions about anything we talked about last class, anything about the course more generally. If you do have questions at any point, feel free to email me or feel free to give me a holler during class, and I'll be happy to get to that. All right. As a reminder, the first Canvas prompt is due this Friday, right? The prompt is available on the front page of Canvas, and this prompt covers the first week of readings. As a reminder, there's no textbook, but there is a free ebook, and I'm asking you to read a short section of that ebook in order to prepare you for that prompt, right? You could choose to skip it for this week if you'd like to. Just remember that you need to complete 6 of the 8 prompts overall in the quarter. So that's due this Friday. It goes over the content from the readings, and we'll be breaking down that content a little bit more in this class. I'm not requiring formal citations for these Canvas prompts, but you're welcome to send me a draft, or if you're running into issues with completing this assignment, want some extra help, etc., I'm happy to help you with working through it. Just keep on your radar that that's by this Friday. So for today, I want to talk a little bit about some of the resources available on campus to discuss your success in the course. We'll be talking a little bit about symbols and how we use symbols to create and maintain meaning with each other. And we'll also be understanding some of the different genres and types of communication and how those different genres of communication matter. So one of the things that I don't know is taught very well in general or in college specifically is the process of note-taking, right? Note-taking is useful in your classes as you're preparing for exams, as you're working through assignments, as you're doing all of that good stuff. And I wanted to give you some tips on how to take notes for this class, since it's a good idea to do so. So one thing to know about this class that might not be true of others is that I link the slides on the front page of Canvas before class starts, and those slides will stay up for the full term. So one thing you do not need to do is get everything written down as we're moving between slides, right? So you don't need to worry about like jotting everything down because that will be available for you to refer back to, right? Rather than writing down every word, instead, I really recommend focusing on what I consider to be those aha moments. So if we're talking about an idea or concept and suddenly you have an example you think relates to your personal life or your experience or just something that clicks in your head, it's a great idea to write or type that down. One of the other big things that I really recommend is organization, right? There is nothing worse than just having a list of notes, not knowing what time that they correspond to, realizing that you missed a class and that you're trying to catch up on things that you had missed, and you don't know what is relevant in preparing for something like the midterm. So I definitely recommend really marking the date and the topic from that day as clearly as possible, right? And making your topic specific is a really good idea. Rather than just saying interpersonal communication, you might say talking about genres of communication, right? I like to make it clear what we're going over for that day, and really organization through those headings can help you later. I also recommend for your other courses, if instructors provide slides, reach out to them, see how they give those out, and see if they're willing to offer providing slides. Another thing you can do is with a phone, take screenshots, right? I definitely recommend reaching out to your instructors to see if they will allow you to take screenshots as well. And do not be afraid to ask your instructors for your classes if you need them to slow down, right? It's their responsibility to pace things properly. So if they're rushing too quickly, please let them know, please flag them down. That goes for me too, right? One thing that you should also know for this class is that you might be using paper to complete attendance activities, right? So I do take attendance. I take attendance through your completion of group activities or prompts. And I recommend carrying out a separate sheet of paper. You can also send those prompts to me through email. So keep that on a separate sheet from what you use to regularly take notes. One last thing I'd recommend, right, is finding a buddy or somebody else in the class. Maybe it's somebody involved in a team or activity with you, or maybe it's the person that you worked with and met on Monday, with whom you can catch up and take the opportunity to share notes if one of you needs to miss class. Again, I have each class recorded and available on Zoom after class, so you're welcome to refer back to that in working together. but you might reach out to a person with whom you can work on catching up on things that you missed. There's also what's known as the Cornell method of taking notes that I think is a really useful strategy in all of your courses. The title and date, as mentioned, are really important. And you essentially separate it out in a T with some key questions, comments, major ideas, right? These are the terms or concepts that stood out. For example, things like interpersonal communication, right? And then here on the right, we might take the kind of loose notes of things that have been discussed and talked about during the class itself, right? So I think that's a really good method for capturing some of the big ideas. You don't have to use it, but I wanted to provide that as a resource. Any questions about taking notes or anything similar? For some of you, you might be a pro and might feel good about that, but I think it's a good idea to just refresh on that and talk a little bit about practice. So the next thing that I want to talk about are some of the resources available on campus. Many of you said that you weren't very familiar with navigating some of those resources, including the Writing Center. We have some awesome things on campus, and I don't know that they are as marketed or talked about to the extent that they should be. We have a number of faculty and people who are directly responsible for helping your success and whose literal job it is to ensure that you're able to do well in the class. So one thing that I wanted to direct you to is tutoring. So we have tutoring for communications. We also have tutoring for a number of other resources. The links for both the tutoring and Writing Center are available on those slides for today's class. One thing that is incredibly cool that I just learned this year is that we have e-tutoring available for essentially every subject. What you need to do is just log into the portal. And then once you do, you indicate your course, they match you up. And in many situations, you can get matched with a tutor within hours, right? And these tutors are experts who are designed to help and to support you with your courses. They can set up things, including Zoom meetings, and there are tutors that can meet you face-to-face on campus as well. You can also ask e-questions, where if you have a specific question about something in your courses, you can get in touch and receive that support. They also have a chat feature. So there's a lot of really great things that you can use through this service. If you're interested in becoming a tutor, you can also reach out to the Tutoring Center. They're always looking for new tutors, or you can get in contact with me and I can help get you a connection. If you've taken some courses before and you're looking for a good career builder, it's a great opportunity. So tutoring is available to help you if you're struggling in courses or just need additional support. Another resource that I think is incredibly useful is the Writing Center, right? So the Writing Center is over in Loso Hall, so just down the way from us. So the Writing Center is something that you can access face-to-face. If you're struggling with writing, if you're working on an essay or project, if you need to submit a draft of something similar and you want feedback, right, you can automatically do that and receive some resources there. You can meet with Writing Tutor, who's designed to coach and to help you with writing. But one thing that I think is really useful, regardless of whether you want to reach out to somebody specifically or seek a tutor, are some of the handouts that the Writing Center provides, right? So it's just here on the front page. It has some things about working on readings for courses, has things with editing and proofreading, has some tips with organization and how to structure your writing and so on. Even if you feel pretty good about writing, it's a great way for you to refresh on some of those skills and feel really good about doing so. So in addition to that, there's computer lab availability. The English and Writing program here at EOU has a lot of resources there as well. There are resources about becoming a writing tutor, if that's something that you're interested in. But I did want to direct you to those things that I think can be really useful, especially if you're falling behind, right? As I mentioned on Monday, if you've got a fire, put it out, right? The sooner you reach out to those resources, if you need extra help, the better. Any questions about any of those things? Okay. Are people feeling a little bit better about navigating some of those resources in Canvas? Awesome. If you do have any questions about any of those resources, feel free to reach out. Again, I think that they are incredibly helpful. The library on campus is also a great quiet place to work and to seek out if you need research for any of your classes. So I want us to zoom out a little bit and talk more generally about communication, right? Communication is one of those things we talk a lot about and think communication is valuable, but I don't know that we necessarily define or explain communication properly. So does somebody want to take a stab at a very, very general level? What is communication?
It's the transfer of information between two systems.
Zeke, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so transfer of information between resources or individuals. I think this gets us in a really good direction, right? To help to crystallize this, and again, it might be good for you to have a note to yourself on defining communication or communication being something, including your notes. Communication is the use of symbols to convey shared meaning, right? We're going to be unpacking those different parts of that sentence in a little bit more detail. But again, symbols matter. Symbols can be words, symbols can be photos, they can be icons, they can be gestures, they can be you nodding. If I ask you if you understand something, right, that would be considered a symbol. And I understand if you're nodding, that you are comprehending material or that you are agreeing because that meaning is shared. How many people have ever been to a country that does not speak the same language that you do? Yeah, several of you, right? Oftentimes you find yourself dealing with a really challenging situation when you have no idea what people are saying. The signage and icons and all of those things don't make a whole lot of sense to you, right? If you've been to Europe, there's like the signage looks really different. There's like a blue sign with a red X on it that you see everywhere on the roads. So that can be a challenge because meaning is not shared. You do not know the language, you do not understand or pick up on messages in the same way, though you might start to over time. Pictured here on the top is Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes is considered to be a pioneer and scholar in semiotics, or the study of signs, right? We use signs, we use symbols to convey meaning and share ideas with one another. And according to Roland Barthes, there is a signifier and there is a signified, right? In other words, communication, these symbols or icons that we use are not the thing. If I say there is a dog here, right? The word dog is not the actual four-legged creature, right? It is symbolizing or standing in for or representing the dog. And if I say the word dog, depending on your experience and your background, what a dog could be might be really different. But if you're one of my friends growing up, a dog means a little Shih Tzu because they had a ton of tiny Shih Tzus growing up, and she's not a fan of dogs. If you're like me, a dog means a terrier, like a little West Highland White Terrier that bit my face and left a scar on me when I was 5 years old, right? What that means depends on your own lived experience, but the signifier carries specific meaning into our lives, right? We use emojis. I understand increasingly that Gen Z is using emojis more and more ironically, right? Where the intended meaning of the emoji is not necessarily what the emoji directly says. But that's an example of the signifier and signified changing, right? We oftentimes experience generational divides or challenges because what another person signifies to us is not totally shared, right? You might have a grandparent or older relative on social media who likes to post memes or gifs of minions, right? And that can be really obnoxious because the signifier does not necessarily resonate with your experience. So if somebody is sharing a laughing emoji, and let's assume that they're doing so sincerely, what we would assume or represent or stand in for is somebody that is looking at their phone and laughing, right? The signifier or symbol, being the emoji, is standing in for the experience of somebody laughing, though what that means could definitely change over time. In fact, we kind of have an inflation of meaning for symbols where somebody could be sending like a row of laughing emojis and never actually laughed as they were reading something on their phone, right? So I have a super short clip that I wanted to share that's an example of semiotics in action, right? Helping us to think about and understand what semiotics means in our lives.
This blob is eating dinner. This blob is sleepy. This blob loves you. But how do we know that? This is a job for semiotics, the field of study that explores how humans and other organisms derive meaning from the world around them. In semiotics, a sign is anything that represents or indicates something else, called the object. A sign isn't necessarily pictorial. For example, the feel of a fruit may indicate its ripeness, and the sound of buzzing may mean there is a bee around.
Right? So semiotic both means that there is a visual or written representation or something, but it could also mean a sensory experience, right? We hear buzzing or we see smoke and we know there's a fire. We convey meaning through signs for a lot of different reasons. How many people have ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay, so a few of you. I've seen a variation of this where like right under the bottom layer of the pyramid, there's Wi-Fi, right? Which I think is pretty fitting. So we communicate to fulfill physical, social, and personal needs, right? If we didn't communicate in one way or another, we would not let other people know what we needed in order to survive, and we'd have a much more difficult time. Now, what it means to communicate can be very different. There are a lot of folks with disabilities who are nonverbal and nevertheless have meaningful ways to communicate, whether it is through written messages or whether it is through using things such as sign language, right? Sign language is a language, it is communication, but it just happens through the use of gestures. So here at the very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, we have the basic physiological needs. If you're hungry, right, or you didn't get enough sleep, there's a good chance that that experience is overwhelming for you. You're not going to be able to focus on your notes or your classes until you have those basic needs met. And I know going through college that can be a bit of a challenge. Then we have this sense of safety, right? And you can think about this as kind of going back biologically. We can think about our lizard brain that's really trying to do these basic things. We want a feeling of safety. We want to make sure that we are in a location in which we are okay, and that we have the resources in order to survive. Now that we know that we have our food, we have water, short term, we're trying to make sure that we can have that long term, right? Things such as friendship, family, or sexual intimacy are examples of love and belonging. Now that we are in a space and we're safe in that space, we want that to feel comfortable, we want to feel included in that space, and we in many ways associate our social relationships with fulfilling those personal needs. As we continue to move up, we move into esteem. You are a member of a group, right? And now that you're a member, you're valuing and judging yourself as a part of that group. So for instance, self-esteem are the value judgments that we make about ourselves as human beings. I am a good person, I am a bad person, right? That's a way that you make judgments about your own self-esteem. We also consider things like our confidence, our achievement, the respect that we receive through other people. So if you're new to a club or activity or team, right, oftentimes you feel a need to prove yourself as a member of the group, kind of fitting within those esteem needs. And then at the very top, we have self-actualization, becoming the best version of yourself. The idea that we achieve self-actualization only in the event that those other needs are being met, right? So at a very basic level, we communicate to fulfill our needs. We might have safety needs because we're applying for a job or internship that is crucial to our careers and is crucial for fulfilling our safety and physiological needs so that we can get paid, right? Perhaps unsurprisingly, a lot of studies have shown us that we're happier when we communicate, and we're happier when we communicate effectively, right? There's nothing worse than the feeling of interacting with somebody or meeting somebody for the first time and feeling like you didn't make a good impression or you didn't talk with them in the way that you wish you had, right? So the ability to communicate effectively is crucial for human beings to feel survival. And it's also the idea that we want to feel heard. We want to feel understood, and we want to make sure that our needs are met with other people. If you say, I really need to go to the bathroom, you're on a road trip with somebody else, and they ignore you, they don't pay attention to your message, then that'll be a big problem for you, but also potentially for them. So the ability to fulfill those social needs are important in thinking about why we choose to do interpersonal communication. As mentioned, a symbol is not the thing. If I say apple, right, that does not magically conjure up this little round fruit, right? An apple is a stand-in. If you really think about it, right, the language, the letters, the squiggles, they look nothing like an apple. So the symbol is not fully standing in for the thing. It is a representation of the thing. And again, we have what is known as noise or challenges in communicating a message because our shared meaning might not fully overlap. Apple, maybe it's a Fuji, maybe it's a Honey Crisp, maybe it's a Granny Smith, right? That depends on your own experience and what you associate with that meaning. In this way, meaning has to be shared, right? In order to create shared meaning, we use context. We use clues and we use symbols that allow us to make sense of words in relationship to each other, right? So if you were to say, I went to the Apple store today, right? There's a good chance that you would interpret it as, okay, you went to Apple, the computer company, and you got your phone fixed, or you got a new charger, right? That would be an example of how contextual clues help us to make sense of shared meaning. In this way, if you said, I'm going to the Apple store, to somebody that had no idea what Apple even meant as a company, right? They might think, oh, you're going to get the fruit. So when we communicate across culture and we communicate across difference, we need to understand shared meaning, right? When I ask you, do you know what interpersonal communication is? And I've established ground rules for what interpersonal communication is. It's about creating shared meaning so that as we build on those ideas in the class, we're starting from that common framework and that common groundwork, right? Again, pretty straightforward, but I think it's useful for us as we're continuing to work through these ideas in the class. So I have another pyramid for you, and I promise this class is not a pyramid scheme. This pyramid covers the different elements of communication. As mentioned, I'm the co-chair of the communication program. We teach a lot of different courses within communication. So if you're interested in more, we generally have courses that fit in all 5 of these parts of the pyramid. But I think knowing these different parts and knowing the sort of scope of each of those parts would be useful for us as we think about sort of what communication does for us. At the very top, we have this idea of intrapersonal communication. Does anybody want to take a stab at what they think intrapersonal communication means? Yeah, Zeke?
Sort of the internal monologue communication within a person.
Sure. Saw a hand up right next to Zeke as well.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say,
Yeah. Remind me your name.
um,
Macy. Yes. So both of you are right. Intrapersonal communication is communication with yourself. And sometimes that could be like me, where you're doing tongue twisters on the way to work. It could be talking in the mirror to hype yourself up before a big game, right? Intrapersonal communication is also kind of like your inner dialogue, right? It's something like your conscience. If you're familiar, right, with Pinocchio, with Jiminy Cricket, right? I've heard the new movie is terrible, so I haven't seen it, but, right, he is the conscience or the inner voice for Pinocchio. And we all oftentimes have this inner voice in our heads that says, you shouldn't do that, right? That would be an example of intrapersonal communication. Interpersonal communication, we already went over, it's between 2 people, right? Interpersonal communication, by the way, is one idea we'll be talking about in the class. We don't have an intrapersonal communication course, but I do think it's a good thing to know and learn a little bit about in this class. Group communication. So group communication was that example brought up earlier of sending a text to a group, right? Group communication is generally anywhere between 3 to about 12 people. We actually teach a course at EOU called Small Group Communication that gets into that role. And we oftentimes are in small groups when we're at work, when we're with a group of friends, etc. Communication we do in that setting is fundamentally different in a lot of its characteristics. Public communication could be communication to a larger group or population. A good example of public communication is if a political candidate is giving a stump speech or town hall address, right? That's where they're generally speaking to their constituents or voters, and they're reaching that larger audience. Mediated communication is at the bottom, and this is an important distinction, right? Communication between two people can be mediated and can go up here in interpersonal communication. But when we mean communication at the bottom, we generally mean mass media. In other words, media that is not tailored for a specific person, but is intended for a general or larger audience, right? So if you have Disney Plus subscription and you started watching Andor, right? That's an example of mediated communication. It wasn't made for you. It's maybe made for people like you or people who enjoy Star Wars, right? But it was designed in order to facilitate a larger audience. Advertisements, music, movies, etc., all fit within that scope of mediated communication. All right, any questions on these 5 parts? Pretty straightforward. Again, I went over these different 5 parts. Intra with yourself, inter between people, group typically between 3 to 12, public with a larger group or population, and then lastly, mediated communication with a larger group. So what I'd like us to do now is I'm going to split you off into 5 different groups. And in your groups, I'm going to ask you to brainstorm situations in which your part of the pyramid is used, right? So parts where, for instance, mediated communication or intrapersonal communication is used. And I'd like your group to come up with as many examples as you can think of. Once you've done that, I want you to think back to Maslow's hierarchy and think about some of the needs that your step in that pyramid is fulfilling. And then lastly, I want you to think about some of the challenges of using this type of communication. And I would like one person in your group that is either typing or writing the notes on those, including the names of group members, so that you can turn that in at the end of class for attendance. So we've got a little over 20 people for today. So I'm going to split you off right now. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We'll have the 5 of you focus on intrapersonal communication. We'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Focus on interpersonal communication. We'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Focus on group communication. We'll have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Focus on public communication. And then 1, 2, 3, and 4. Focus. What was that? Oh, yes. So on the 5th person right here, focus on mediated communication. Thanks for that. So go ahead. Does everybody know their group and category? Sweet. So go ahead and meet with your group. Have somebody who will write or type your response. Ask you to take about 7 or 8 minutes, and then I'll ask a person from each group to share.
Yeah, that one would. So situations.
Unless they're like.
I'm on a phone. Any other ideas? I don't know. Like your content.
I like that point about like problem solving and critical thinking, right? It's like externalizing that calculations you have to make every day about something. You go out and drive, right? You want to make a lane change. It's putting that out there.
I'll say daydreaming, I'll also say. What are some of the words that you can say?
Health and motivation.
Yeah.
Um,
The important ways to think about this, right, is that sometimes interpersonal communication. You know what the difference is. Sometimes it's a casual
Well, that's-
conversation, right, the direction or trajectory.
all right, and then we'll go to number three.
Where you start,
What are some of the challenges?
why not?
On your own. It's hard to, on your own, you get rid of confidence in many ways.
Friends like, well, they do work podcasts, right? Oftentimes, people want to hear people talk.
Sometimes you just don't know what to do.
That's a challenge, right? In group communication, it's like, things will help. Sometimes fire. Jump in and add to the conversation. And oftentimes, right, when something that's true, and norms, expecting growth, right? People start using jargon or slang on sports teams. And people get to know. So, and in the absolute. In something like public. There's gonna be a collection of people don't agree or don't understand that always like that's the kind of communication happens. Yeah. Sure. So the challenges with kind of communication. Yes, so those are a couple that we think about. You can also think about access, right? How do you access a lot of public? How do you get the word out? And how do you just really get an audience? Yeah. You don't know how hard. Yeah. groups would like some more time. Noticing a bit of a lull here. I'll let you shortly wrap up here. And again, I'm asking for a representation or a representative from each group. So if you want to, you can nose goes it if you haven't picked already.
Yeah. I can do this.
Okay, so let's go ahead and hear from each group. So I'd like each group to share the situations that they found, the needs of this communication, and some of the challenges. All right, so let's start here at the top with interpersonal communication.
Yeah, so some of the situations where you find yourself kind of like just talking to yourself, we said like kind of like journalism or like note taking, your consciousness, your self motivation, critical thinking, meditation, daydreaming, or like daily planning.
Mhm.
And then for some of the needs that come with it is the confidence, a safety thing, problem solving, love for self and sympathy. And then some of the challenges is you're on your own. It can be hard to build confidence. There's only one opinion. It could be lonely by yourself. You could get lost easily, and there's only one set of confidence.
Yeah. How many people enjoy hearing a recording of their voice? Nobody, right? And that's because there's a mismatch between how we think we sound, right? The depth of our voice versus hearing it back. We think there's so many things we say and do that we just don't like, right? And that mismatch speaks to interpersonal communication. So hearing yourself back, feeling that disconnection or frustration, as you said, right? A risk that we feel insular, like, does this person like me? Well, you don't really know because you're not communicating with them. You're getting at times stuck in your own head. So that can be a challenge because while it's useful to gain information through interpersonal communication, sometimes you need that outside information to help. How about interpersonal communication?
Interview, debate, or counseling, or just some type of conversation. You know? And it fulfills like friendship and you feel like you want to form like some of your psychological, physiological needs as you go to growth. The passion and and then some of the challenges can be like with social media, the interpretation can be also
This is great, right? The through line seems to be the relationship between you and that person, whether it's casual, or spread, family member, et cetera. It's going to change the nature and dynamics of that. How about group communication?
Group communication, the brainstorming we came up with was just like in the classroom, sports teams, and what we just did within the groups is also an example of group communication.
There you go.
The needs that it fulfills are teamwork, sharing ideas, problem solving, just that social interaction. Some challenges could be cooperation. We have like different ideas and trying to get on the same page and understanding those, and just figuring out where you fit in inside the group and how you can add meaningful ideas to it.
Yeah, not a lot of us like working in groups, but it's a useful and important skill in creating that shared understanding and problem solving within groups. It's incredibly important. How about public?
For our examples of public, we said they can be press conferences, class meetings, political speaking, conventions. For the needs that this type of communication fulfills, public questions, different opinions and security. And then challenges for disagreements and misconceptions.
Here from mediated, it's pretty simple.
So mediated, situations we got, concerts, podcasts, live streams. These that we get, that people get. So like this platform, feedback that the others. Then some of the challenges that we come up with, the phone the audience, reaching out to everyone, feedback from the audience, when they're like, like communication on the side, then access to our group.
Yeah. So the through line in both of these groups, right, is that we use feedback and signals from the person that alters and changes how we communicate. We don't get that same feedback and resources when we're communicating to a larger group, right? We don't understand how the audience of a large group is reacting to what we have to say. So I wanted us to go through this to understand these different parts of communication and why they matter and to help to pare down interpersonal. We talked about interpersonal communication between two people focusing on the exchange of meaning. Talked about using symbols and this idea of semiotics. We talked about the pyramid where interpersonal fits in with other genres of communication. Next class, we'll be getting into perception. How do we map out communication that we do every day? How can we make sense of it? How can we make it better? Please pass forward or email me your group's work. Make sure that the names of all group members, first and last, are on your piece of paper. And have a great rest of your morning. I'll see you again for Friday. Thank you. You too. Awesome. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
But obviously, so when it does come to that, well,
Yeah. So yes, if you are remote, you are still able to let me know and I can send you the Zoom link. I know if you're actively computing, you're on the road, you can't. So I'll have those recordings out. If you get those 3 absences after that, you can watch the recording and just complete that makeup assignment on Canvas. I'm also happy to meet with you if you're feeling fine or you want to catch up on anything for classes. But I appreciate you being proactive and continuing.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bree.
Similar topic,
Yes.
wrestling, here's the days I'm gonna be scheduled on.
Yep.
That's it, that's for varsity.
Thank you.
I think I'm gonna make sure to see if some of the dates change, but I'll give you a heads up regardless. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Coach
And,
just had that signed, so just some heads up.
yeah, and I think you probably heard the same spiel from me about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
All right.
Appreciate you letting me know. Hi.
We could also see others, their work about what we just did.
Oh, see other people's handouts and
Yeah.
work on those
I think
things.
that would be like helpful as well.
Yeah, what I can do is put together kind of a document that has those things.
Yeah.
And I can link that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, if we could put that somewhere in the sheets or whatever.
Yeah, I will get working on that and I will have that for Friday. That's a great
Thanks
idea.
lot.
Good to talk to you, of course.
Okay, while those other folks were giving their days off,
Okay.
especially on mine, I only know these, this is a Monday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I don't know which other of these fall on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays.
Mhm.
But these are just some days that we don't require.
Yeah. So, you get the 3, past that, I'll have the recordings up. You can complete those makeups for any of the days that you've missed past those 3. I'll also be available for like office hours or meetings for anything else that you'd like to catch up on for those dates.
Gotcha, and like an excused absence, like Mondays, want to count as one of the 3 to
Right. So that would be one of the 3, just kind of to make sure everybody is caught up. But you can also join if you're like out of town, but you're available for the time. I can also send you a Zoom link for that day. You're welcome to just join through that.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.